Hello, friends. I'm Steve, and today I'm joined with two very special guests, the authors of Seasons of Albadone, Christopher Warman and Élan Marché. How did I do?
You did pretty well. You did pretty well.
Okay, good. Wanted to make sure I pronounce everyone's names properly, but I want to thank you both for coming to chat with me this Friday.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
our first interview, so we're kind of on the nervous side, but I think we'll do okay. We'll see.
Oh, don't
Give it a go.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, don't be nervous. It's really relaxed and just easygoing. So unwind from the week. So hi, how's everybody doing tonight in the chat? Thanks for coming by to chat with us. And so I started reading. It's been on my list to read for a long time, Seasons of Albadone, and I wanted to get to it. And I was surprised. There's some really emotional beats that I was not expecting that really get you, that I didn't see coming. So what were the inspirations for the book? What kind of went into it, or what was the process for it?
Well, it's kind of an interesting one. First of all, people never seem to expect the emotional beats. If one thing that I've learned actually from writing a book is to make the cover match the tone, because I think a lot of people kind of expected kind of a YA, young adult type novel from this cover, which I love the cover. Tim Kelly, TK Prince on Instagram, he's awesome. A good friend of mine. But yeah, definitely try to match the cover to the tone next time, because there are some heavier emotional beats on in this book that you wouldn't expect. But as far as inspiration and how it all kind of got started is originally I used to work at kind of a sit-down office job, and I had a lot of time, and I always wanted to write a fantasy novel. So I started writing one that was very big in scope. And that got very tedious. I was obviously reading Song of Ice and Fire at the time, and that was kind of the inspiration, is write something with a lot of characters, very complex, get really into this big scope fantasy epic. And then I got really bored of that, and it got really tedious to kind of try to pull the strings all together. So I was like, no, let's scale it down. If I'm going to write something, let's make it be something really small scale in a very small location with very few characters. And that got me thinking, what are the characters that no other fantasy book really covers? And it's, it's all the people that are, I like to think of it as like the NPCs. So I kind of started writing it with that in mind, is one of them is an enchantress, or an apprentice enchantress. And she's not, the magic isn't very, expansive in this world. So it's very low scale magic. Another character is a foreman. He's just building something in the woods. Another character is just this alcoholic father. And and then another character is just this woman and her baby. And so I really wanted to keep it really small scale and not too long. And that was the inspiration for it. And so I started writing it, and eventually I actually lost my job February 2020, right when the pandemic hit. And at first, you kind of celebrate with an unemployment where you think you're going to go back to the office, and it keeps getting deferred. And then eventually the reality set in that, no, this is my life now. I don't have a job. And so I really kind of got going with it. And I was like, if I'm going to write something, it's got to be now. So I kind of really, dove into it. And my wife, Élan, at first it was a solo thing, and then eventually I started explaining the story to her, and she got really into it, and she started suggesting some things. And
I was really intrigued, because I got to see the process towards the end. So like after he'd already figured out he didn't want to go with the typical main figures of a fantasy story, and he'd already decided to go with this kind of glimpse into the daily lives of the characters that would normally be in the background. And I found that really, really fascinating. And once he lost his job and I was working from home, I kind of jumped in and I was like, well, I'll just do some, because I have a bachelor's degree in English literature. So I was like, cool. You know what? I'll be your grammar pass. I'll just kind of, make sure everything is readable and makes sense. But I started to really fall in love with just the idea behind the story. I really, as someone who has read a lot of literature, I liked the idea and was immediately attracted to, what can we do in this genre that's unexpected and that focuses on some characters that you normally, they wouldn't be the feature of a story. So that's, I think, what got me into it.
Yeah, it got to the point where it just didn't, because originally it had the cover with my name on it, and it just didn't feel fair to just have my name on it. I was like, no, this is a collaborative effort at this point. So it became, a co-authorship, and it was very exciting to actually write something with someone and bounce off ideas. And she was my, I don't know, world building person. She would say, she would stop and read a sentence and say, yeah, but how could we make this sound like it's in this world? Like a lot of times as a writer, you kind of get stuck in these pre-made sentences.
Cliches.
Cliches.
Like a lot of what I would do is like, okay, but what if this cliche existed in this universe? What would they say?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So she really gave voice to a lot of the characters beyond what I had originally written.
I think that's really neat that you collaborated on the book together and it's produced. That's really cool. And I want to say congratulations, because I noticed on social media that you were married recently, right?
Yeah. Well,
so it's weird. We got married in May. We actually had our wedding, but we just recently last month celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary because we got legally married before we actually did the ceremony. So we got COVIDed with our wedding. It was really unfortunate because we had been together at that time for 10 years. And we had talked beforehand about intentionally waiting to do our ceremony and to get married when we had raised up enough money to have this huge wedding. We wanted to have a big wedding. And we decided that the perfect year for that was 2020.
Awesome planning, Brad.
Right? The best laid plans of mice and men do often go astray, and that certainly was the case for us.
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020. And
literally 2020. So we ended up postponing our wedding, and we had a much smaller kind of ceremony with just our family. That was like a little private signing kind of thing. It was really funny. My mom insisted on making us ball caps that were embroidered with our last name initials, because she was like, well, it's like signing day for sports. I'm not a sports person, so that was lost on me, but we did get new hats, which was great.
You can never have enough hats.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's always nice to have hats. That's really great. And you mentioned the smaller scale fantasy, and for me, I've been reading a lot of really heavy multiple POVs, and it's fine. It's fine and everything, but this book was like a breath of fresh air because it was small, contained, and there was enough characters to keep it interesting, but not too many to get lost and to be overwhelming. There was no info dumps. It was just telling stories around the area. So that's what I really loved about it.
Yeah, it was in that aspect. It was kind of one of the early inspirations was definitely like grim fairy tales rather than being inspired by things like A Song of Ice and Fire, Wheel of Time, like these big epic fantasies. It was let's really get down to the nitty gritty. Each story, it's not that they have a lesson that they teach you at the end, but they do feel self-contained, and the character does have a kind of a mini arc. Kind of like grim fairy tales, and that was really like a big inspiration. Actually, the first story that was written for that was the second one, the one that takes place in winter, A Father. And I don't know if you've gotten through most of it yet, but
I'm one season away. I'm about 40 pages before.
Yeah, the second season was actually written before all of those, like way before, like in what, 2016, 2017?
Yeah.
No, 2016, yeah.
That one went through a lot of iterations because originally we'd actually done it back when I was in film school. I tried to make it as a film project, and we meddled with that for a little bit, and it ended up not actually coming to fruition. And so we just kind of tabled it for a long time. And to be honest, that one was really cathartic to work through as a story, because I'd failed at it as a director. And so it was nice to take a second stab at it and really do the work of finding the character, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of refit it within this world, because we love that story so much, and it kind of felt I don't know.
It felt incomplete.
Yeah,
we'd started this project. We tried to do a Kickstarter to raise money for a film. It never ended up happening. And it was just kind of sitting there as this unfinished creative vision. And so it just was so satisfying to finally make that into something.
It must be pretty frustrating to have it just sitting there waiting to be read.
Yeah.
Waiting to do something with it.
Yeah. And we had shot like a good 30% of it.
Oh yeah. I had to
wow.
actually confront my kind of trauma around the story from having, failed to make a film of it.
Yeah.
And to come back to it and be like, okay, I've had a failure with this tale before. What was I missing? What did it need to really become something that people would want to watch or, read or be engaged with?
Yeah.
So that was actually really fun.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, once we actually got back into it, and I loved how it fit so neatly into this, because whenever I actually started writing it as a book, I wrote season 1 first, and then I started kind of mapping out where it would go, and I thought to myself, wow, this story that we had shelved, it fits so well into this world, and I started kind of writing it as a prose rather than a screenplay, because I had originally wrote the screenplay for that. And once I started fleshing it out, I started realizing, wow, this really works in this world. And then I have, spoiler alert, I have Handel, the character, meet a character from the previous season. And that's when it suddenly worked. I was like, oh, this worked. This is the puzzle piece that was missing. And and it really did feel cathartic. It felt really good to release it.
And Redima mentioned, I love how folks see the book felt great vibes. Yeah. And I forgot to mention, I mentioned on the chat before the stream, but I will be giving away a copy of the book. You just have to make a swords emoji in the chat, and then I'll enter your name on my list. And towards the end, we'll do a quick little wheel and pick a name. And also, Christopher mentioned before the stream that you'll also be doing a digital copy.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, so just as a fun thing to do for everyone coming by to chat with us. So stay tuned for that. So now you can't leave. You have to watch.
Exactly.
Are there any plans to finish the adaptation? Are there plans to continue that? I know you have about 30% done. Are there any plans in the future?
For the
to film it?
Yeah.
No, probably not.
So no, I like it so much more as a story. I think honestly, I was really able to finally connect with the character on that level. It's the proto version of that story that we were working on as a film is much more shallow, much more straightforward. It lacks a lot of the character depth that we were able to find later on.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it wasn't the right story for the time in our lives that we were at. But when we revisited it later on, we found a lot inside of it.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the key.
Yeah. Also, just having the experience of writing Handel's point of view rather than just seeing him on a screen and seeing the actor act as him, which, no dissing Cass, the guy who played the Handel in the original iteration. He did a fantastic job. He actually embodied the character so well. I kept envisioning him as I was writing it.
Oh, yeah.
But getting into Handel's point of view and actually just writing the experience of someone who is dealing with addiction, who's, who feels a constant disappointment to his family and to his peers. And I don't know, that was just much more fulfilling than it was to, just have a screenplay and have someone act it out. It was really fulfilling to get into Handel's head. I really enjoyed that.
Really touching season, the story of his arc. So yeah, at the end of the first season, there's another reviewer, Benjamin. He's on YouTube, and he had a review for the book. And when I told him I was reading it, he said, "Oh," and I told him it's fun, and I'm laughing, and he said, "Just wait, it gets darker." And I thought, no. And then I got to the end of the first season, yeah, it got pretty dark.
Why wait to have the big? Yeah, why wait to have the big twist at the very end of the book when you can have it in the 5th chapter?
Yeah, exactly. Why wait? So, Brandy, my wife, is here. She asked, "Is this your first book?"
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for both of us.
Yeah.
It was something I at least always wanted to do, was write a fantasy novel, and this was our first attempt at that, and hopefully it was a good one. But it definitely taught us a lot in moving forward and continuing expanding the series. We definitely know where to go from here.
Yeah, it's such an interesting process, and I think we discovered really that we're very complementary as writing partners. I mean, for starters, we have very different taste in what we read. And I think that helps a lot. Like, he's a huge fantasy fan. Me, I kind of like character study novels that are a little bit more dry, and I like a lot of nonfiction. And so it was really nice because we could balance each other out. You know, he knew what to expect from the genre. And for me, I could really come in and I could ask like big thematic questions about like, well, what are we trying to say here? Or, you know, what is the message we're trying to send? And I think that worked really well. We didn't fight with each other because we weren't approaching the story from the same angle at all. So.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. You kind of balance each other out. And Redeemab says, turning a failure into a success. We love to hear it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm expanding a little bit on that sort of complementary style of writing is, and this is, you know, neither here nor there, but I'm one of those people that I do read all the reviews that I get. I'm that petty. I know they always say as a writer, don't read your reviews, you'll get disappointed, but I do. I read them all. And one of the things that kept coming up was, oh, wow, I couldn't tell where one writer started and the other picked up. And that's because that's not how we wrote. I think a lot of people expected, you know, being a book that's divided in sections and having two writers, that each section would be like written by someone different, but it's not. Like, we both wrote them together all the way through. So that's kind of why one of the compliments that I got inadvertently was, wow, this doesn't feel like two writers writing it. It feels like just like one single voice. And it is 100%. We wrote it together.
And each story does feel contained, like it's focused, but you feel like it's part of the larger world. So there's enough to know that it's connected, but not too much to where it gets too heavy. So that's what I loved about it. And Iron Ring of Books had a question. Is this book similar to the Fable video games?
Oh, as someone who has played the Fable video games, probably not really. I guess those are a little more progress based. These are more like I would really compare it more to a collection of fairy tales that are, or folk tales, I guess, a collection of folk tales that are kind of interweaved by a thread, a thematic thread. And they do kind of take place, you know, over the course of a year. Each part, in case people didn't know, each part covers a different season. It goes from fall all the way to summer.
Weave in and out, like you'll see the same characters pop up repeatedly and interact with each other in different ways. I haven't played the Fable video games though, so I feel like I can't really answer.
I keep hearing how great they are. I've never played them, and I always feel like I should have, because I've been hearing about them for years. But yeah, so I can't relate there. But Redima says, I've played a little Fable. I think it does have a similar vibe in terms of making choices and the consequences, morals of those choices.
That definitely I could see.
That was definitely a theme that we really consciously tried to hit again and again, is just that idea that, you know, you're living in this fantasy environment. And I feel like one of the conceits of a lot of fantasy work is that, you know, everything is connected in some way. And we really played off of that idea, not just with having the characters be connected, but also all of their actions ultimately affect everyone in their community.
So I just type in the names here so I don't lose track of the names. And Brandy asks, so will there be more? Yeah, that was one of my questions too. Is this a series? Is it a trilogy? What are the plans for this series?
It's called the 8 Chance series, and you can see it on Amazon whenever you purchase the book. And we are currently in the process. We're about a third of the way through in the process of writing the sequel.
First draft, yeah.
For first draft, yeah, a third of the way through the first draft, not the entire process.
Yeah. So we still have a ways to go. We're in the process of recording and releasing the audiobook for Seasons of Albadone. So that's kind of been the hurdle we're trying to get past before we can really devote all of our energy on the sequel. But that is in the works. We're definitely working on it.
Yeah, and hurdle as in she's recording the book herself. Well, we're doing it ourselves. Yeah, I'm doing all the mixing and mastering. I've got a little bit of background in that, and she's reading every other part. So part 1 and 4, which are the female point of views, and then the male point of views are being read by Michael, a good friend. He's really, really, really excellent.
He's got one of those radio voices, you know, that just
yeah
makes your other audiobook reader super insecure.
Yeah.
She's doing a great job, and yeah, it's sounding really good. It's probably going to be released around the 1-year anniversary of Seasons of Albadone, which is in November, and then we'll really focus in on the sequel. And obviously, as I mentioned, there was that original high fantasy Game of Thronesy book that I was writing a while ago, and everything that we've been writing so far kind of leads to that. So I do have, a 3rd book planned, and I think it's going to be about 4 books is what I kind of have planned. Maybe we'll see.
We'll see if it goes beyond there, but I think, people who maybe read the first book and were like, oh, this isn't what I'm used to with fantasy. I would definitely encourage them to pick up the 2nd book that we're going to do, because it might be more like what they expect. We're going in kind of a different direction with it, but we're still keeping the heart of, everything is going to be really character based. We have, like some sort of message in each book, but a little bit more maybe what people expect. Definitely longer. So,
much longer, at least twice the size.
Yeah, we've already almost written as much as Albadone, and we're not even like halfway through the book. So.
Oh, cool.
It's going to be a chunky one.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Just said it's going to be a chunky one.
Chunky monkey. Yeah, chunky. And there's something really special about when an author narrates their own audiobook. There's just something about it that is just, you can't replicate it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely.
I hope that remains true after you hear this one.
No, I'm sure it'll be good. Reading and Whatnot is here. She said, what's the best and worst part about reading reviews about your work?
Ooh,
that's a good question.
Do you want to take it, or?
Okay. So for me, definitely the best part is, when anybody compares you to another author that is like well known and that you like, oh my gosh, is that flattering? That's like peak dopamine release of just pure joy. I would definitely say the worst part is hard to think of, because thankfully we've had very kind reviewers, I guess. Even if people didn't necessarily resonate with it, they weren't like, oh, this is trash. They were very polite about being like, I'm not into this, but I could see other people being into this. We did get one review early on that I don't really take it personally, because it was obviously a trolling kind of thing, where we had, posted that our book was free, and somebody, without even downloading or reading the book, was just like, 1 star, don't like it, bad book,
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
And then that happens,
We actually, went through their past reviews, and we looked up, they'd given some book a 3-star review, and then written a page and a half about how much they hated it. And I was just like, and you gave us 1 star and just said it sucked? Come on.
Give me something.
But yeah, we're very petty when it comes to a review. I'm just kidding.
Super petty.
Personally, we really haven't we've had our almost overwhelming positive reaction to the book, which, even the, negative reviews, they're very positive. They're like, this wasn't for me. I was expecting something either from the cover. I was expecting something more YA, or something with a little more action. Whereas we wrote this very, emotionally based character study. rather than something that's quest based, I guess. Yeah, the cover does kind of give the impression that this is kind of a quest, which is kind of what we're going to try to rectify with the sequel. Is it's going to be a quest based book.
A lot of times, like I have such like a sense of just, again, like kind of pettiness mixed with pride of like, those people that didn't really resonate with the first book. I'm kind of like, we're coming after you with the sequel. Tell me you don't like the sequel, then we'll talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna get you.
But as far as positive reviews, the dopamine I get, especially when someone really resonates or understands what we were going for. I think most recently Benjamin, his review, it kind of took my breath away. I was like, this is someone who really understood what we were going for, and he actually he said some words that specifically regarding our use of the word the cost throughout it. It's very much about cost results from deriving from actions, and he really caught on to that. And as I was watching his review on YouTube and even reading it, he posted a much longer one on Goodreads. I was like, this is someone who really not only resonated with our work. This is a person that he got what we were going for. And that really, I don't know, that kind of touches a part of me that I never, thought was there, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's, it's weird calling yourself an artist, but, as an artist, having my art understood, it really feels good.
Yeah, I bet. Fit to be Read said, I'm not much of an audiobook listener, but if I were, I would definitely much prefer having the author reading versus another voice talent.
I agree. Definitely. I think I'm trying to think actually, I don't think I've ever read or listened to an audiobook.
I've never listened to an audiobook with the author actually reading it.
Yeah.
And I know they exist. I know they're out there. I just haven't personally encountered one, I guess.
Yeah. If anyone has recommendations on it, please. I'd love to hear them because that sounds awesome.
I'm a huge audiobook listener.
Yeah. We listen to a lot of audiobooks together.
Our friend Jeff Lane, he wrote One Way in the Champion Saga. I don't really listen to audiobooks much, but he narrated his books, This Paper World and This Brony World. And when I go on bike rides and things, I'll listen to his book because it's him narrating it. It's something really cool about it. So I kind of got a kick out of that. So that's one suggestion. One Way is really good. His book, One Way.
Also, I was going to say a plus of having the author read their own novel is
it's free.
Well, besides how it's free, it's also, and I had it on such a smaller scale because obviously our book is very short. There aren't that many terms like in a lot of fantasy, a jargon and fantasy lingo. So whenever I had to explain it to Michael how to read certain names of towns and names of characters, I started realizing, we didn't have to do that because the author already knows how to pronounce everything.
Well, but honestly though, that was part of the process. Is like we came together, and when we were making the book, we would both read it. He would write like the chapter or something. I would go in, I would do my whole like markup process. We would discuss some things that like maybe I thought I had ideas for how to change certain things and stuff like that. But we didn't really discuss like names or places or things. So we each had a vision of what these things were called in our own heads. And so a fun part of the audiobook was kind of coming together and being like, okay, what is this person's name?
Yeah. How do we pronounce
this? I say it one way and you say it another way. And we kind of have to come together and agree on this.
Yeah, we did a pass of the book, singling out every name, every city name, every town name, the names of the magic. One of the hard ones was there's a lot of chanting that happens that is in a very specific ancient language, and she had to read that for the audiobook. And
of course he was inspired by most of the chanting, because he's Italian in background. He's from Italy. And so that was heavily influenced in how he designed the chanting. It's very like Latinate. I had a hard time with that. So anybody listening to the audiobook, those chants, just get through them because they were hard.
Redima mentions Donna Tartt's Secret History. One of the versions is read by her.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And also Neil Gaiman has a couple. I
Oh,
didn't
that
know
could be
either.
fun.
Neil Gaiman, he would be great to listen to an audiobook with. I love his voice.
Yeah, he does have a
Yeah.
good voice,
Mm-hmm.
and his books are really fun. So that could be a really fun experience.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Neil Gaiman, Reading Whatnot also mentions Neil Gaiman reads most of his books, and they were amazing. Listen to his stuff.
Okay.
You know what? I think I actually have listened to him read The Ocean at the End of the Lane.
Oh, did you really?
I think I did.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
So
awesome.
there we go.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And he did a fantastic job. I feel like I did an okay job.
You did a good job. She's really good. She's
Oh yeah, I bet.
she tapped into that podcast voice, and
There's just no quicker way to reveal every insecurity you've ever had about your voice than to just try to record an audiobook. Yeah, it just brings everything out of the woodwork, you know.
I bet you notice every little thing. You know, when you really break it down, you notice every and uhs and.
Oh,
You know,
the
every
worst part
word.
was Chris pointed out that I am super Midwestern when I say the word mountain. Like no T. There's no mountain.
Mountain.
You know, mountain. That's how I say it. and I didn't notice that until he was just like, oh, just so you know, every time you say mountain, it just sounds just so Midwestern. And I was like, great, now I'm going to be insecure about that forever.
Never point out that kind of thing. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Just let people pronounce things the way they want. That's what I've learned from this. Mountain.
It just, that's how you, like, how do you say mountain?
No, mountain.
It sounds weird, like plantain, mountain.
Do you say plantain?
I probably would, you know what?
So when there is a word that you mispronounce or you misspeak, or do you have to go back and re-record it, or how does that work? Do you have to can you chop it up and dub it, or like, you know, cut out a piece, or do you have to do a whole?
Yeah. Sometimes you have to redo the whole line so that it sounds natural. Sometimes you can Frankenstein it a little bit, you know, and chop little pieces in and it fits. Sometimes you come back to it and you have a totally different voice, which that's another thing I never realized until we were recording an audiobook, is like your voice changes throughout the month. And like, there's some weeks where I'll have like a really deep voice. And then there's some weeks where like, I just can't hit that register at all. So yeah.
So re-recording them, sometimes you'll listen to them back to back, you know, the original piece and the re-recorded piece, and they sound completely different. It's like, is this even the same person? And so, yeah, you don't notice, you know, the weather can affect your voice. What you've had for lunch can affect your voice. If you've had anything to drink, you know, like alcoholic beverages, they relax your vocal cords. So just, just anything can affect that kind of thing. Yeah. And then sometimes we've had the last chapter that we recorded, the final chapter of the book. She did such a good job. Like we were feeling it. We were going through it. Did such a great job. Yeah. And then re-listening to it, there's this electric buzzing throughout the whole thing, just constant. And I to this day I don't know what caused that. It's like a static. I tried to use like de-essers or denoisers, and nothing would fix that to where, you know, the quality of her voice started degrading. So we just had to re-record the whole thing, and that was kind of heartbreaking, but she still did a really good job the second time around.
Oh, that's gotta be really frustrating.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we also had a family of crows that just moved into our neighborhood recently, and they start cawing at around the time when we're recording, which is super helpful.
Yeah.
It's usually around this time. I'm surprised they're not out today. This would have been
right. Yeah, usually they would be cawing already.
Yeah, 4 p.m. Pacific. They just start cawing right outside. There's a tree right outside our window, and
I really want to become their friends. I keep thinking of things to like leave on the porch to like get on their good side, you know?
Yeah, maybe they'll leave you alone for a while.
Maybe. Or they'll just bring me shiny things. Either of those two options is great for me.
Bonus. Fit to be Read mentions, I listened to the William Gibson audio narration of Neuromancer, and helped me enjoy the reading experience. As a supplement, the inflection and tone makes things more understandable, the intent.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I definitely see that, and that's definitely a part of like how I read it. I do definitely have a very specific like tonality for things and like a way of presenting the characters. I don't do character voices necessarily, but I kind of do. So I hope people enjoy that.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, you know, you always want to do a voice for the characters, but then you realize, no, it's not a, you know, it's just an audiobook. It's not, you're not trying to really get into that. And
my voice, but I have like a certain way that I read those lines.
Yeah. So it was a lot about, you know, finding these characters' voices.
Some characters were way difficult than others. So
yeah, you had a hard time with Mother Ola at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it took, you know, I just told her, just get through these lines. We'll re-record them once you find her voice. And it took about chapter 3, and then she really started reading, like it just kind of clicked, and she really started giving her own characterizations and her own voice without, you know, overacting or anything like that, because it's not an audio drama, it's an audio book. Once that clicked, I was like, wow, okay, let's go back and re-record every one of her lines and do it this way. You got it.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
So I have to ask, was it hard, some of the Mother Ola lines in the first couple of chapters, was it hard to not laugh when there's a couple of funny lines that she has in the first few chapters?
If I may, there's this one line, and it's not even a line, it's a sound she makes, and it's written in the book, and it's one of her first lines. It's written in the book, all caps, and it's just B-A-H exclamation point, like a bah.
Bah.
And I'll tell you, that was the hardest line to get right, just that one sound. I think we might have re-recorded it like 20, 30 times.
15 times,
yeah, just to get through that.
It's such a throwaway, like, little line. And I mean, that was right when I was like really struggling to find her character. And like, especially when you're the writer of the book too, these people like live inside of you. You picture what they look like, what they sound like. And, you know, for me, Mother Ola definitely did not have a voice like even remotely similar to mine. And so trying to translate that into reading her with my voice, it just felt wrong a lot of times. And so it was like a really difficult thing to try to figure out, like, you know, how can I hit that in a way that like is still me, but also her also.
I think gesticulating kind of helped you a little bit.
Oh, tons. Yeah. I had to stop like wearing any bracelets or anything because like most of the lines I delivered and I was just like doing this with my hands the whole time.
So no rattles. Yeah. And plus I would imagine that once you find the voice for a certain character, you have to reproduce it every time they have dialogue. Was that tough to,
Yeah. Like I wasn't doing, I think like part of why I wasn't doing voices was because that would have been even more difficult, but even just hitting the right tone. Like there were times when, you know, especially when you're reading an audiobook or something, you'll just like read a line. And then at the end of the line, it says, you know, Adriel said sadly or whatnot. And like, that's really important information when you're reading the dialogue. So there was a lot of like reading through it, getting to the end, and then being like, well, I read that wrong person. Let's try again.
Wow.
Yeah, it got to the point where I started kind of going through the book and just highlighting the characters' dialogues in different colors. Just so she would knew beforehand who was going to speak. But yeah, those moments of, you know, she snarled angrily, and then you're like, oh, why did I read that happily? So go back and, you know, there's a constantly catching up with yourself.
Right.
But Ola was a fun one. I think she embodied her very well. And yeah, there were a few moments at the beginning where, you know, like Ola just declaring that she has to go take a shit.
Yeah.
Which someone actually complimented me and told me, I don't think I've ever read a fantasy novel where someone said they were going to go take a shit. And I was like, okay, more shit in fantasy novels.
Right.
I don't know if I can say that. And sorry, apologies.
No, you're fine. No,
okay.
No, it was one of the. It made me laugh out loud when I read that because you don't expect to, you know, that kind of character to say something like that. So it was a good one. It was a good one.
I thought that went really like hand in hand with the whole idea of taking like NPC characters and making them into the focal point of fantasy stories. It's like, you know, why are we not pooping in these stories? More pooping all the time.
Everybody poops. So,
right?
Yeah. Even fantasy characters.
Characters poop.
Even
the chosen one.
Yeah. Lit Noir mentions, goodness, I hate the sound of my own ums and uhs. I can't.
Well, thankfully, one of the things that you can, that you don't do with audiobooks is you don't actually have a lot of ums and uhs because you are
You're
actually reading.
it. Yeah.
There's no moment where you actually have to think about what's coming next because you are reading it off the script. So that's pretty easy. It's more actually...
It's more misreading things.
It's more misreading things and going back. Or one thing that tends to happen a lot, especially if you've been reading for a while or you've just had a drink of water, and you don't notice this whenever you're first, recording it, but whenever you're actually, re-listening to it, especially with headphones, is there's a lot of wet sounds, and nobody wants wet sounds in their audiobooks. It's kind of not great.
Little ASMR moment.
Yeah, little ASMR.
Yeah, you're just listening to this fantasy book, and then you have like a little bit of like gummy yum 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 sounds.
Yeah. So sometimes you can fix them if there's silence. You can just cut that out. But if it's in the middle of a sentence and you got to re-record that, because I know that irritates a lot of people. Some people like it; they get ASMR out of it, but you don't want that in an audiobook.
Not everybody wants that.
It's not. It's for the general public.
Yeah. And I was wondering about, so when was the intention to always self-publish, or did you think about getting published from a major publisher?
We were always pretty much self-pub.
Yeah, we were pretty set on that. It was always just very DIY. I believe a lot in DIY. I always done DIY. I was in bands. We self-recorded, self-produced, self-released. Same thing with filmmaking. We've done several short films, always DIY. Even with this one, why not? I have a lot of background in just marketing, specifically with the films that I've done. I have obviously we failed the Kickstarter for the film that we did for this one, but I did successfully completed another Kickstarter, and that taught me a lot when it comes to like marketing and being active on social media. So I took a lot of the lessons that I've learned through having bands and doing films and working on that kind of stuff. And brought it into the book scene, and it's all the same. It's all about just being active online and yeah, self-pub. Once I learned what that was, because it's pretty big right now, but it's still a pretty fresh thing that people have been doing, and only recently. I mean, whenever I started writing this, nobody was really reviewing self-pubs on YouTube, and this was just a year ago. Just a year ago, it wasn't very common at all. And now, especially with things like the self-pub fantasy blog off and that kind of stuff, really kind of going into the mainstream of BookTube. I think self-pub are kind of being looked at through another lens. And I think that there are a lot of exciting self-pub books out there that kind of excite me a little bit more than TradPub, because they can be a little bit more daring. They can kind of push the envelope a little bit more, or they can tell stories of NPC characters in a folklore, low magic setting like we did, that's completely character based. And I don't think anyone would have really, sought to publish this traditionally, to be honest.
Yeah. A lot of what I read is self-pub. Since I started reading, since I really started reading a lot more at the beginning of the year and started the YouTube stuff, because it's what the creator wanted. It seems like you mentioned, there's less constraints. There's no one over their shoulder saying you can't do this, you can't do that. This isn't marketable, or this isn't popular right now. You have to change this to this. So I really love that. Whether I enjoy it or not, I love that it's their vision and not something that they had to change. So
yeah,
I appreciate.
And
that.
Granted, I will say though that there is something, there is a positive, and there is something to be said about having a group of people behind you kind of supporting you, like a publishing company does. They support their authors, and a lot of times they will give them very valuable advice when it comes to hitting certain beats in their story to be marketable, even with book covers, which we also learned a lot about. And the publishing companies, they do a lot of good in that aspect.
Yeah, they do a fair job. I think like the biggest thing for, I think drawing us towards the self-pub market was that Chris just happens to have a lot of really great social media marketing experience already to draw from. And I think that's a lot of what you're paying for in the traditional published market, is you're paying for someone to manage things on the social media spectrum And, you know, it does take a lot of, it's like a full-time job. Like, you know, Chris will check our, the tags that we're using on our book, and he will, you know, make sure that they're actually getting us traffic, and if they're not, he'll substitute them with other tags. And, you know, like keeping up with that kind of thing, and constantly being present online, that is kind of its own full-time job in addition to being a writer. And I think like there's something to be said, I think, for kind of our, like this newer generation that's coming up. You know, we're more familiar with that already, and I think we kind of have an advantage over some of the older generations that, you know, were entering a publishing market and they needed to outsource that kind of thing because it just wasn't worth their time to familiarize themselves with that whole process and how to network in the net environment. But we kind of already come from social media, and I think that's a real advantage. And that's, I think, kind of why Selfpub has been having such a renaissance.
Or not even renaissance, a naissance.
Yeah, like not even a renaissance, and a renaissance.
Yeah.
Is there a term for pre-renaissance? The first sance?
Yeah, a first first wave.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely that. A lot of Selfpub people are, especially the ones that are successful, they're very active online. Yeah. They have a good presence. They're very well liked, and they check their stuff. They don't really outsource a lot of their marketing, and some do, but most of them really don't. Most of them are just very active on Twitter, on Facebook, on all these groups, Discord. And as she said, a lot of the older guard, they don't really do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess one of the exceptions to the rule is, you know, Brendan Sanderson. He does a lot of, he's very active, especially with videos and classes and all that kind of stuff on his YouTube page, which is, you know, very refreshing for an author of his caliber to do that. But not a lot of people do.
He's not Selfpub, you know.
He's not Selfpub,
He might have his publisher's assistant or something is coaching him through how to do that, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I like the DIY scene. I like being self-reliant and doing that kind of stuff. It's very fun for me to market, and
seems like a lot of work to do that. And it's nice to do it yourself, but it sounds like it's very time consuming and lots to consider. So you definitely it's a lot involved. And we mentioned social media. Are there certain, because it's a great tool because we wouldn't be having this conversation without it, but are there other ways that you use social media responsibly or in a healthy way, that not to get too sucked into it? Because there's another side to social media that can be negative for some people.
Yeah, no, definitely. And even for me, you know, like a lot of times I'll realize that I've been, you know, so focused on the marketing aspect of our writing. And then I realized, wait, this hour I could have been, you know, that I didn't learn anything in this hour about marketing or about my book. I just spent it on there, just making sure that I'm getting engagement. It's, you know, the monitoring part of it, which you should be monitoring it if you're doing it. But there is a line that you can cross, and suddenly you realize, oh, this is all time I could have been spent, you know, writing my next book, editing the audiobook, and so there is something to be said about, you know, how much time I spend on it. And and I know that a lot of Selfpub authors do spend more time on social media than, you know, your average person, which I think the average person already spends a lot of time on social media. But yeah, there is something to be said about, you know, that line between work and pleasure. And after a while, you know, social media stops being, you know, about having fun, and it starts being about, you know, creating engagement with the book. And that can be kind of tedious and break your spirit a little bit.
You kind of have to balance it out, because, like, you know, if you were traditionally published, you'd have somebody that would be like concentrated on that social media kind of stuff, and then you would just be free to write all the time. But when you're trying to kind of wear both hats at the same time, you really, really have to be careful about your scheduling. You have to set like really hard limits on, you know, this is the time I'm going to spend on marketing, which is super important. But also this is the time I'm going to spend on writing, which is just as important.
If not more.
Yeah, they go hand in hand, and you have to find that balance, I think. And honestly, I'm just, you know, really lucky that I can tap into you on that, because like, literally I am like not on social media except for Facebook, which is super old of me.
She's a boomer at heart.
I am a boomer at heart.
But if
so
only
funny.
there were only two hats, because there are so many more hats, because you're also doing advertising through Amazon, which is its own beast, and it's tedious. It's hard. I've had several months where my ads were pulled because my book got mistakenly classified as erotica, and Amazon does and Amazon doesn't allow ads for erotica books. And
that was a whole thing.
That was a
Trying to
whole
get them
thing.
to take that tag off. Oh my gosh.
Because you're not allowed to view on Amazon. You're not allowed to view your book's metadata. So somehow an erotica metadata snuck in because someone searched for erotica books, saw an ad for Seasons of Albadone, and clicked on it. So that happened. It's automatic. And then they pulled our ads, and I had a contact to Amazon, and they kept telling me, well, why did you classify your book as erotica if it's not erotica? I said, I didn't. It just happened. Right? It was a whole back and forth. So there's advertising, marketing, and it's a lot. And also the audiobook, which we could have given to someone else to do, but in the DIY spirit, we did it ourselves, and it's a lot of work.
Oh, that had to have been really frustrating and hilarious at the same time.
It really was. It really was. Yeah. Like you remember calling my parents, and I was just like, we can't get our book to stop being erotica. They just keep labeling it as that. And then when we would point it out, they would be like, well, your problem is you're labeled as erotica. And we were like, yeah, that's what we're telling you. That is the problem.
It was just a back and forth of, us saying the same thing over and over again. They would tell us the thing that we knew, and we would tell them, yes, corrected. Because it's, it was a mess, but thankfully we got that settled. And, but yeah, Amazon advertising is needlessly complicated, and it's very metadata driven, and you as an author don't actually have any access to that metadata. So it's pretty tough.
That's strange. If an author that wanted to get self-published and wanted to kind of start this process, what if they came to you for advice, what would be your advice?
Well, first of all, because because you are self-pubbed, and you have all this freedom of not having anyone on you just telling you what you should write and all that, that's great and all, but my first advice before you even publish would be have people read your work. Have and not just any people. You could have anyone read it, whatever, but make sure your target audience if you're gonna self-pub a fantasy, make sure fantasy fans that you trust, and some that you don't even know, make sure they like your book. Make sure that, because we had people read our book, like beta readers that read it and said, hey, this part doesn't make any sense. As a fantasy reader, this part just doesn't jive, and they were right. At the end of the day, you want people to enjoy. You can have all the freedom in the world, but you want people to enjoy what you wrote. So make sure you have beta readers. That's super important, because you don't have the luxury of having a publishing company, support you in that aspect.
Like,
so
get as many eyes on that book as you can before you release it. Each person that you have read it will give you valuable insight into, like, even if it's not a change that you need to make, it might just be something you need to be aware of about your book. So yeah, definitely having people read it. And then I would say, look at the whole writing process. If you're going to try to do self-pub, think about 50% of your work is writing the book, editing and finishing all the stuff that has to do with the actual product, the book. The other 50% that I think a lot of people aren't willing or ready for is the marketing. So because you're not going to be traditionally published, that has to fall on you, and you have to kind of learn something about search engine optimization and tags and market research, and those kind of things that people kind of think of as secondary to writing a book. Those are really, really important if you're self-published. You kind of have to do that. So
there's also, there's a lot of trial and error. A lot of things that, I know not to do my second time around. Like one of the biggest advices that I could give is, and this is something that I see a lot of first time self-pub authors do at the very beginning, is they push for pre-orders and they push for marketing the book before it's released. You're a nobody. Nobody cares about pre-ordering a book from a nobody self-pub. Like, sorry to burst the bubble, but sorry, I'm not talking to you, Steve.
I'm not a writer, but
no,
no offense to you.
To first-time writers, sorry to burst your bubble, but nobody cares about pre-ordering the book to of a nobody, really, because you haven't written anything. This is your first time around, and I didn't know this. I spent so much money on advertising my book for pre-order to only get 3 pre-orders, and this was a month in advance. It's a waste of time. Just release your book and then build hype from that, because nobody knows who you are, and it's different from Brandon Sanderson pre-ordering the next Stormlight Archive book. Sure, everyone wants to get on that. Pre-ordering Seasons of Albadone by Christopher Warman and Élan Marché. Who are these people? Nobody knows who these people are. So don't focus too much on the pre-order aspect. Release your book whenever it's ready, and then just start marketing as a released book.
And then a piece of advice we've actually received from other self-published authors that we've talked to and spoken with about the process is that the best way to get more traction for your first book is to write a second book. So that really proves that you're a creator that's consistent and that's going to produce content. So like if you're someone who's published a first book, there's nothing better you can do for yourself than to publish a second book.
Because people are going to want to read the second book, and to do so, they have to read the first one.
Right.
So suddenly they're like, oh, let's read this first book. And one thing that Amazon, I criticize them a lot in their platform, but one of the things that they do allow you to do is to bundle releases. I know, and to me, the peak of self-pub authors is Will Wright with the Cradle series. That guy knows marketing. My God, does he know marketing? There's a reason why, as a self-pub author, he has that many reviews and that many, on both Goodreads and Amazon. Like the guy knows how to push his books. And the best thing that he could have done was write 2, 3, 4, 5. What is he up to? 8 books in the series at this point? And one thing that, quite a few. And one of the things that Amazon allows you to do is to bundle those books together. So he's been repackaging his books with new covers where it's, buy this one and you get the first 3 books, and it's at the same price of one of the books. So by doing that, he increases traffic and he increases his reviews and his revenue. And the guy is brilliant. The guy's a genius. And now I'm realizing I hate talking about books in a revenue way, but if you're trying to be an author, you're obviously trying to make a living off of these books. But there are a lot of techniques that you can do, and learn from Will Wright. Write 8 books.
And particularly, I think for the fantasy genre, there are like a lot of fans of fantasy that are looking for like a grand epic that they can get involved with. They want, something that's going to be an escape for more than just 200 pages or so. They want to be involved in like this big series, and they will wait. They will not buy your book until you've made this series that they want, to read. And so like those are the patient, waiting in the wings kind of people that are just like cheering you on for your second book, even if they haven't read your first, because they would love to read it. They just want it to be more. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And have you thought about writing other genres other than fantasy?
Maybe.
Yeah, like that's definitely something I would be willing to explore in the future. I feel like I have a lot of like college ideas for like weird character study novels that I have just like saved in a document somewhere that I'm just like one day I feel like I'll revisit that and maybe write something. I tend to like very like boring like stereotypically boring books.
Not that boring. They're a little drier.
I like
but...
slice of life kind of novels, and so I have a couple ideas for that I might get around to at some point. But I'm definitely really enjoying writing in the fantasy genre. It's a little bit more swashbuckling than what I'm used to, so I like that.
Personally, I mean, we both have a background in film. We both have film degrees, whatever that means. But I back in the day, whenever I wanted to be a writer, I was focusing a lot more on screenplays. So I have a lot of screenplays, a lot of features that are just kind of sitting in a folder. And I enjoy writing prose a lot more these days. So there's a good chance that some of them might be converted into kind of a prose. Maybe some of them might become short stories or something. Yeah. Like I have a gothic horror ghost story style, Haunting of Hill House style short story that I wrote as a screenplay that it might end up being a prose eventually. But definitely want to focus on this series first, the fantasy series.
Do you have a favorite fantasy series?
Oh man, me personally, I read a lot. I used to not read, and then I used to work 2 hours away by train from where we live, so it was 4 hours of commute a day. Sometimes a little bit less, but usually around that. So at first I would be on my phone all the time, and then I realized that I should be reading. So I went from being a non-reader to just being a super avid reader. I read, A Song of Ice and Fire, read Wheel of Time. I think I'd say probably Wheel of Time is my favorite because it's the only completed series that I've read. It's hard for me to judge an incomplete series, even though obviously Song of Ice and Fire is very iconic and very, very good. But currently I'm reading Realm of the Elderlings. I'm reading the Farseer trilogy, and I'm on about halfway through the third book, and it's blowing me away. I've never read anything like it, and it's fantastic. So I have a good feeling that once I finish all, 14 books? No, it's more. I think it's 18 books or so. I have a good feeling that it's probably going to end up being my favorite series.
And Christopher, I know you're excited about the Wheel of Time series that is on Amazon, I believe. Élan, are you excited too about it?
I am very excited. It's hard to keep him from ruining everything because he's just so excited to talk about it. And I keep having to remind him, I'm like, I don't know these characters. I don't want you to spoiler the plot for me, and please shut up. But no, I am very, very excited about it. I watched the trailer and I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on, but I'm here for it. I'm excited. So
it was hard to, watch the trailer with her and not stop it every 5 seconds and go,
He was like, that's just so you know, this is the blah, 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 blah. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, no, it's going to be even harder watching the actual show with her. I'll have to just shut up. I'll just have to, keep the excitement inside and just let her enjoy it. Because, as someone who's read the whole series, it's hard to not get, excited and yell things out that might be spoilers.
Oh yeah. Like he told me early on, and I if anybody who hasn't.
Oh, maybe don't.
I can't talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so just shut your ears if you aren't familiar with Wheel of Time. But I know for a fact he told me the horse dies, and that ruined so much for me. I haven't even met this horse. I'm already sad. And now I'm gonna be sad throughout the whole show. The whole thing. I'm like, he's gonna die. Why would you do this to me?
It might not even be until season 3 or something, so you might be okay for a couple of years.
No, it's like final book. It's quite a while.
Great.
No, so you have something to look forward to.
A little bomb of sadness waiting for me at the end of that finish line, and I'm so excited to reach that.
Oh, so I just saw Riddimus say, Realm of the Enderlings is 16 books. I'm very excited to dive in. And 3 books in, it's the best series I've ever read.
Wow. I love Robin Hobb. Yeah. My wife Brandy's reading Robin Hobb now.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. She's so good.
Yeah. And Élan, do you have any slice of life recommendations for us, for those of us wanting to get into slice of life type of books?
Okay, so one of my favorites is it's a book called Stoner by John Williams.
Stoner.
And yeah,
Okay.
it
Let me
is
write
just
that
about the unremarkable life of a underpaid English literature professor. I read it as a super underpaid English literature major, and I don't know, it just resonated with me, and that's one of my faves. And then as far as fantasy goes, again, I'm not like a super dabbler in fantasy, but I do love me some Kurt Vonnegut, and I feel like he's on that fantasy edge. He technically kind of sci-fi fantasy, he's adjacent, right?
Yeah, a little magic realism and kind of strange. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he has some just out and out sci-fi parts
Yeah.
to his books, like Sirens of Titan and even parts of other ones. Like it just, that's kind of part of it. And so I would say he's probably the closest author to just like pure fantasy that I really have read a lot of. My mom actually dialed him once.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
It's a random story. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom in college, she was taking a Kurt Vonnegut class, and they were in, I want to say Iowa, whatever state he used to live in. They were in that state taking this Kurt Vonnegut class, and one night they got just super, super drunk in their apartment and decided to look him up in the phone book. And they found him there because everybody was listed in the phone book. And so they just gave him a call and they had a full conversation with him. They're not sure what they said because they were really drunk, but they did talk to him. So that's always fun.
Wow, that's really cool. Kurt Vonnegut in the phone book, who would have thought, right?
Right? Yeah.
I feel like now that's kind of unthinkable.
It's such an old school thing, but this would have been back in like, I think the 70s, late 70s.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, privacy has kind of become a whole, big thing now. But yeah, back in the day, it was phone books. You could just find whoever you wanted,
right?
Or whoever you needed. Even authors, apparently.
Yeah, they didn't really have robocalls. I think that was part of it.
True.
Just drunk collegiate students calling you in the middle of the night.
I wonder how many drunk calls Stephen King received in the 70s.
Oh yeah, coked up calls. Yeah.
Right.
I bet. I'm sure that he got inspiration from something like that for Misery. Was a super fan standing him a little too hard. I'm sure he got calls from them.
Right.
Yes. I don't want to spoil anything from the book to ruin the experience for anybody, but I have a question about character deaths.
Oh yeah.
And how hard is that, or how do you make them? Well, first, is it difficult to kill a character that you've created and you get to know? The second part is how do you make that meaningful without being, or make it have some weight to it?
I think. I think the most important aspect of it is to definitely be on theme, because you don't want the character death to feel empty. We really, because not to spoil too much, there are character deaths, even main character deaths in the book. We always were striving to make sure that every character felt on theme and not empty and vacuous. Just always making sure that there was a means to that end. Or that it was a means to an end, and not just do it for shock value. Even though a lot of people were shocked at the the sudden pace shift that happens in chapter 5, as I'm sure you were.
It was great, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, just never make it feel like it was, it just had to happen. And I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah, it's pretty hard sometimes.
Yeah, I definitely, I don't really feel any guilt.
No, not
killing
guilt.
a character. Like, I'm manipulative enough that I'll just be like, yeah, people are gonna cry about this. This is so sad. But I do I feel like my contribution to the book is always just maintaining that focus on the bigger themes that we're trying to communicate. So my whole thing is, coming into whatever we've written, I'm going to ask, like, for each part that happens, like, what is the point of that? Did we have to do that in order to send the message? And if we didn't have to do that, you know, what are our other options? Is there something that we could do that might send the message better? And so, like, I definitely, you know, would never kill off a character just for funsies. But if it serves a thematic purpose, no guilt, dead, fine.
Yeah, guilt isn't the right word. I don't feel guilt. I feel bad, obviously, writing it, but in a different way, in a way where it's, I don't know, I almost feel thankful. It's like I wrote this great character, and I'm like, thank you. Yeah, thank you. They serve their purpose. Thank you so much for allowing me to tell your story. And this is the end of it. And it serves a greater purpose, because every character death in the book, at least, leads into, you know, a spiral of other events. It's never just, it doesn't happen in limbo. And a lot of them affect things that are happening in the second book, even though, you know, some of these characters might not appear either because they're dead or because they just don't. But a lot of the you know, the consequences of the actions in the first book really do affect the ones in the second book, and so on and so forth. Nothing just happens in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Especially character deaths.
Yeah. Well, they were really well done. They really touching and surprising. So
yeah,
it was really great job with that. Yeah. And I think that something like this would be a great place for, because people have asked me, where do I start with fantasy? You know, where it's really intimidating, and there's all these characters and all these really complicated stories, and it's kind of like, where do I start? But I think this would be a great place for someone just wanting to get into fantasy, just to start and just kind of dip their toes in, or someone looking for a change of pace. With it's a really great story, but it's not a ton of POVs, and it's not a ton of lore, and I think the prologue is like 2 pages long, but it tells you everything you have to know. It's enough to get you into the world. So
yeah, we really didn't want, we wanted to stay away, you know, kind of staying in the lines of that NPC sort of story. We wanted to stay away from heavy lore. There's a lot of things that are sprinkled in there that just kind of paint kind of a broader picture of what the world might be beyond the forest. But there's not a whole lot of like just hard magic or, you know, that kind of stuff in it.
I think, like, you know, especially like doing this as a fusion project between our two styles, you know, Chris is definitely more familiar with a lot of the heavier, higher fantasy genre kind of tropes. And, you know, for me, I'm just loosely aware of them through the general zeitgeist. Like, you know, I've seen a lot of fantasy programming and things like that. I'm familiar with Tolkien and, you know, C.S. Lewis, authors like that. And so for me, like, as someone who's not necessarily a fantasy fan, I think we were able to kind of approach it in a way that's very easy to get into, even if you're not someone familiar with fantasy, because that's definitely where I started with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, I was like approaching this as like, if I'm not a fan of fantasy, what is there in this story that I'm going to be drawn to? And so I think that was really like my focus, is how can we open this up and make it really accessible to everyone?
Yeah, I like to kind of describe it as fantasy is just the means by which we tell these very focused character studies. Yeah. Because I mean, each character, they're very real people. I've met an alcoholic who, you know, couldn't keep his family together, who, you know, you've met all these people. I met a mother who, you know, just wants to do what's right for her daughter, you know, that kind of stuff. And fantasy is just, you know, the icing on the cake, but the cake is made out of people. Sorry, no.
That is the quote of this interview. The cake is made out of people.
That analogy might have kind of gotten away from me there at the end, but yes, the cake is made of people, and the icing is fantasy.
Oh, that's great.
I can't think of anything I would rather sum up this interview with than that line.
That was great stuff. That has to be in book 2. That quote has to be in book 2.
It should be. Be.
That'll be a blurb on the back.
Yes. The cake is made of people.
Oh, that was really good. I like that. But yeah, I think it's a great place for. I really enjoyed it. So it's a great place for someone to start with fantasy. Yeah, and like I said, especially the alcoholic and the addiction side of it really was very well done, and not in a cheaper. It was just really got me. So
Yeah, I mean, one thing, specifically with, decisions and that kind of stuff is a lot of times you might think that, an alcoholic is just, doing things randomly, but Handel really does believe that what he's doing is the right call at the moment. He really can't help it. Addiction really is a disease, and we really try to not make it feel cheap or, kind of.
It wasn't, we didn't want to approach it as just a plot point.
Yeah.
We wanted to really explore what it means and what it's like to be an addict. And, again, I think that book, or that part of the book, is such a personal one to me, because I tried to approach it as a film, and there's something, especially about addiction, that I think it's so much better when you're able to be in that person's head. And to really understand the driving, constant urges and the voice that just it's never silent with addiction. And so, I think that was something that that was a very personal one for me.
Yeah, the constant justifying of everything is why shouldn't I do this? It's a tough one. It's not an easy read by any means, but it's, I hope it did.
It definitely isn't supposed to be.
No, it's not supposed to be. But going back to the judging the book from the cover, you wouldn't think a book with that cover had a story like that, and I think that threw off a lot of people. But learn from our mistakes.
It's a great cover.
I love our cover.
It's a great cover.
It's great. And honestly, there's a part of me that really, I kind of got interested in the story when he showed me the first season of it in the fall season, and I was reading through it, and I was kind of like, oh, this fits a lot with my genre expectations for fantasy, and this is a chosen one story. And there was something just about that chapter 5 when that switch happens, where I was like, oh, this is really playing with those tropes but upsetting them in a very specific way. And I kind of like that our cover does that too.
It does.
It promises you something that you're used to, and then when you actually read the book, you realize there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. And that kind of is what interested me in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think I love the cover. I think it's great. So I didn't really mind I think I can see how it would throw some people off, but I thought it was great. So no complaints here.
Yeah, the artist was a joy to work with. He was really great. And he's also working on the second book cover.
Yeah, he's going to draw our second cover.
And hopefully, if I can keep them, I'll keep them in theme and have them do all of them.
Yeah,
that'd be great too. Yeah. Well, I know you both are busy, and I don't want to keep you all night, but I want to thank you for coming by and chatting with me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I just wanted to tell you how much I love the book and get to chat with you for a few minutes. So, thanks both of you for taking time out of your day to come and chat with me for a little bit.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely,
This was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for making this such a easy first interview experience.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like we're in experienced hands.
Well, I try to make them, relaxed and just as if we were in a coffee shop or a pub kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Just to relax and chat like we would a casual conversation. So.
Yeah, this was awesome, and hopefully we can come back at some point. This was great.
Anytime you let me know, and I will. Yeah, anytime I'd be more than happy. You let me know when, and I'll make time, and I'll make myself available. And we did have a couple of entries in the giveaway for the paperback, and I should have repeated it a few times, but we did have 3 entries, so I'll send paperbacks to those 3 people. So Iron of Rain Books, and one of them is my wife entered, so I'm going to buy her a copy, and Fit to Be Read. So I'll send those 3 people a paperback copy. And also thanks again for dropping by. It's been great. So hopefully more people read the book and get to experience it.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
This was a pleasure.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming by and joining us in the chat and offering some submitting some questions. It's been great. So thanks again, everybody. Hope you all have a great weekend.
All right, bye everyone.
Have a good weekend, everybody.